Okay, welcome everybody to September's masterclass for 2025 with the Priority Health Academy. In the couple of events that have happened this week and today that I'd like to share and maybe pray on. So, as we all know, Charlie Kirk was assassinated today. And then there have been some recent school shootings and church shootings. There was the recent stabbing of a young Ukrainian woman in Charlotte, North Carolina. And this all has to do with some major mental health issues in our nation and the response with violence. The IMA tonight, with its weekly webinar, had a discussion with a visiting researcher on the use of SSRIs and alternatives and some of the downfalls of the massive use of SSRI drugs. Also, the AI impact on mental health. There was something I'll post in the Q&A section of our Signal account. It was an article written about how AI is actually impacting young children and making them do things. There was a recent suicide attributed to artificial intelligence. So we are in a spiritual war, and I would like to have a little prayer and a moment of silence for all the recently victimized folks of violence based on some mental health issues. We'll ask Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray to you. Prince of heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all evil spirits who wander through the world for the ruin of souls. I would like to introduce our speaker tonight, and I think this is the most appropriate time to have Christian join us and present on holistic psychiatry. So Christian Cioria is a holistic psychiatrist practicing and residing in New Jersey, who I got the privilege of getting to know and meeting through the FLCCC, now the IMA. And Chris and I have known each other probably as long as the pandemic. I trust him and what he has to say about psychiatry and wish there were more of him practicing all over the United States. So with no further ado, Christian, take it away.
Thank you, JP. Thank you for many things. You know what? We met in 22 at the Florida meeting, I think, right? And we had the dinner together, and we went from very concrete thing all the way to talk about aliens and lizards. It was a very fun dinner. But this is I thought I'm gonna have maybe some jokes here today, and of course the way they evolved, it completely ruined any mood for jokes. So very upsetting. But also one thing, to use it as an opportunity for something to bring something to connect the mind to disastrous things that happen to us. My favorite psychoanalyst probably is Winnicott, Donald Woods Winnicott, British psychoanalyst. And he said something that if mankind is to destroy itself, it's not because it's bad, but it it would destroy itself because it insists on thinking that it's actually better than it is. And that actually goes directly into what I have to talk about this unknown part of the mind. 42 is the answer to difficult questions. And I hope I'm not giving answers. I hope actually we get to the same thing that the deep thought in that movie said, actually, that, you need better questions. And then it took another few millions of years to figure out what's the question, really, rather than the answer. I don't know if I'm going to hear reactions or if anyone has anything to make a comment on. And I don't know how I'm going to make this move to the next slide, because it doesn't move to the next slide. JP, I may need some help on what happened that I can't move it. Let me see if I can do it from this screen.
Are you trying to touch it on the Zoom
Okay.
or
Okay, I got it. I got something.
Yes.
So, welcome to the unknown. Usually, you have people who know what they are talking about. I'm one who actually has it in the title that we're going to talk about something we don't know anything about. And part of it is that this thing is not going to work as I was thinking it's going to work. I wanted to thank you for the courage to come and talk about this stuff. And why I'm calling it courage is something that I should go back and explain something. When I was a resident, we did psychotherapy and we got supervised for therapy. And the supervisors were extremely different. I didn't know what the hell they are doing with us. And then I read some stuff on how are you supposed to do psychotherapy supervision, especially when it comes to beginning to do psychodynamic psychotherapy. And I came across something that I found extremely helpful for me. When you don't know something, you have two ways of dealing with it. One is that you provide the information, and the recipient of that information then is able to use it well. The other thing is that people have blind spots. And that's the point where no matter how much information you give, it reaches a dead end. It's very hard to get people to look at their blind spots because they are blind. So the job of a psychodynamic psychotherapist is to kind of remove these blind spots. It's an impossible job, and this is what I'm planning to talk about. So that's why I'm thanking you. Also, what I wanted to say is that they said that when it's they call it a dumb spot. A dumb spot is really easy to fix, right? You just give the information, and that's the end of the problem. But blind spots are far more difficult to deal with. And I noticed that JP put me there as a holistic psychiatrist. That's not what I call myself, but then I thought it's probably more appropriate than I was originally thinking, because other than looking at the fact that there is a body, that there is a mind, I'm looking at also the fact that the mind is more than what our conscious experience says. It's far more than that. So yes, I kind of agree with the term holistic psychiatrist, even though I wasn't using it. So it's probably not a good idea to start from the unknown. We have to move in that direction from what we know. And I picked something that at least we apparently know something about. We'll find out how much we know, but this is the known. We have the DSM, and this is the common language that was given to us by these people who made this happen. They wanted to make a manual that speaks the common language, because before that there were a lot of terms thrown around that nobody, I mean, there wasn't a common sense. So they wanted a top-down common sense thing. So I took as a known one thing that sounds very neat, right? It's a major depressive episode that has very clear standards for what you would call a major depressive episode. You have 5 symptoms over 2 weeks. You have to have one of the first 2 and any of the other up to 9 symptoms in order to call something a major depression, right? You have to have 5 symptoms over 2 weeks. And then you have another few specifiers. They have to be relevant enough. They cannot be a whim, right? The symptoms cause clinically significant distress or impairment in different areas of functioning. The episode cannot be attributable to anything in the physical realm, right? It cannot be a physiological effect of something. And then they have other things that, symptoms overlap in psychiatry. So sometimes they are better explained, for example, by schizoaffective disorder, right? If you have psychosis alone and some mood episodes, then you no longer call it something else. You call it schizoaffective. And criterion E also wants to distinguish it from bipolar disorder. So this is something very neat. So what are we getting here? what are we getting here? This is what they wanted. They wanted to not side with any particular theory of a mind. So we're not going to go into theory of the mind. We get a neat book. And we name things. So we got a new name. We get new categories. And we get coding for categories. And with the coding, then you get legitimacy, right? You can get to communicate with third parties and get money moving around. But is this all that we can know? Is there anything more than that, right? So we got the impression of knowledge, but do we get any really real knowledge? So the question is there anything more to that? So I underlined things. You can find more than what I underlined to question. How did they choose 5 symptoms? Can it be something else? How about 2 very severe symptoms, or maybe 7 but less intense? Why 2 weeks? Is there any difference between 13 days or 15 days having the same symptoms? And if you look at the symptoms, you have depressed mood, you have diminished interest, you have some other stuff, worthlessness. Those are not necessarily brand new developments. They are things that are on a spectrum from normal to pathologic. And it's not quite clear at what point you call it significant. You also have some other interesting things. You can have weight loss, but also weight gain, because you can have decrease or increase in appetite. You can have insomnia or hypersomnia. You can have increased motor activity, or you can have decreased motor activity. And somehow, these people who made the DSM, they decided that this can be in the same category. Also, what they decided that some things cannot be in the same category. For example, once you have a manic episode or hypomanic episode, it's a different category. How they made the decision is not particularly obvious. There is another thing that I wanted to point. I think you're primarily taking care of physical body. So particularly criterion C is important here for medical doctors, right? This episode is not attributable to the physiological effects of a substance or another medical condition. So you probably came across studies where you find out that, for example, vitamin D helps major depression. My opinion, and I leave it as an opinion, is that no, it's not. As long as vitamin D helps anything, you're treating a vitamin deficiency. And that would be depressive disorder secondary to a general medical condition. You are treating the physical body, and it happens that with that you alter the conditions in which the mind functions. But that wouldn't be major depression. Major depression is a purely mental disorder. That's at least the way it was intended. And the criterion C spells out why it's thought of it that way. So this is supposed to be not physiological effect of the physical body. Whatever dysfunction it may have, it's a different thing. So whenever we treat the physical body, you can wonder whether this is what was the intention of the manual, which makes it even more interesting why you think that when you're taking something by mouth, you're affecting the mind. You're probably affecting the body, you're affecting the brain, which is the terrain on which the mind functions, but is it the mind? So this is a set of questions that I'm wondering. I would not want to limit anyone to think that these are the only questions. So what we didn't get from DSM, we didn't get those questions. We didn't get a theory of the mind. We just got a set of symptoms. We didn't get a pathophysiology, right? We don't even have a physiology of the mind from the DSM. And since we don't have the questions, we also don't have any answers to questions. Freud wanted to make a point, and he came up with this quote because he was talking primarily to primary care doctors, to doctors in general who are really looking at body pathology, right? Not mind, not this ethereal thing that we call the mind. So he's saying, suppose that one dark night I went to a lonely spot and was there attacked by a rough who took away my watch and purse. Since I did not see the robber's face clearly, I laid my complaint at the nearest police station with the words, loneliness and darkness have just robbed me of my valuables. So this is from the introductory lectures on psychoanalysis from Freud. So in this case, the loneliness and darkness represent the conditions of the physical body, and the robber is the mind. The robber is very hard to see, but just the fact that we don't see it, we can't just blame the general conditions for the robbery. We have to look around and find the robber. And that's a difficult spot. And DSM does a very good job removing ambiguity, right? DSM gives the impression of knowledge, gives the impression that you can stop there and you no longer have to ask questions, but also we have to ask questions if we're really saying that we're doing mental health, what is the mind really doing? And one part of my training was saying that if you want to be a good therapist, you have to be capable of tolerating ambiguity for very long periods of time. I like this quote from Mark Twain. It ain't what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. So I think a lot of efforts in the direction of mental health are just that there is an impression of knowledge while there are still plenty questions left to be answered. And of course, it's very visible when you have a thing affecting the body that's going to affect the mind. And it's not really, even if you fracture a leg, that's still going to affect your mind, even if it's a very physical condition, right? It's not a psychosomatic thing. But these days, when you talk about mind affecting the body, even Facebook, this is from Facebook. I hate when my anxiety gives me chest pain and stomach issues. Like, babe, I thought you were supposed to be a mental disorder. Stay in your lane. So this is already a common knowledge. This is Facebook making fun of the fact that there is mind over matter, that mind has enough power to create symptoms in the physical body, right? And this is already Facebook. So this became part of the popular culture. Well, it was not always like that. And I hope I'm not going to bore people with the story that I want to tell you. You may know it, but I want to hopefully emphasize some things that were not particularly that obvious. Okay, so the changes in this is not voluntary, right? The mind creates these things without us particularly planning to do and not even realizing many times that the mind is creating those symptoms. By the way, talking about the courage to look into the mind, I had a patient who was telling me how, I don't even remember, it was a he, I think. He went to the emergency room 4 times before he ended up in a psychiatrist's office and looked very disappointed that the chest pains he had were not heart attack. And I did mention that to that person. I said, you look disappointed. You seem disappointed that this was not a heart attack. And he says, of course I am. Because with a heart attack, you know exactly what needs to be done. It probably would have been a mild one. It would have been treated with some, stenting maybe. But in a short matter of time, I would be back to regular functioning, and it's a clear path. If it's a panic attack, if it's a panic disorder, who knows what I need to do in order to get back to regular? I may never get back to regular. This is part of the difficulty with tolerating ambiguity. Many times people prefer to look where there is a clear path rather than really going and checking the dark places where a key was lost rather than looking in the light where there is light for it. So I'm going to start at an important beginning. I don't know if you recognize the guy. The guy is Charcot. He made a big name for himself because he had some particular abilities. And he had something in common with Wall-E. There's this other picture, the smaller picture is from Wall-E. How am I going to get it to? Yeah, he worked in Paris in the 1880s, Salpêtrière Hospital. And because he was a great medical doctor, he got to do some very interesting stuff. But this is a scene from the movie Wall-E. And if you've seen Wall-E, Wall-E is a very weird robot. He was hired, he was created to do garbage collection, but he got a personality. And because he was weird, he managed to survive all his counterparts. And actually, he learned to repair himself. So he survived much longer, but he had a few quirks. He was very curious and he was collecting things. And as you can see, hopefully in the picture, I hope it's not too small, he was collecting and categorizing things. So you see the spoon and the fork, and then he comes across this spork, right? And it's the beginning of the movie, and you're going to think, oh my God, he's going to short circuit, and this is going to be a really short movie. But no. We were very proud to find out that this little robot had the ability to create a new category and put the spork between the forks and the spoons. We would like to see this capacity, these abilities much more frequently among humans too, but we're terrified when something doesn't fit known categories. We're not that great. So Charcot had this thing. He was curious. He was good with observing things. And he was good to notice when something didn't fit the old categories that everybody knew about. So because of that, he made a name for himself, and he ended up having his name listed on a huge amount of medical eponyms, right? And this is all medical. What am I doing with him in psychiatry? Well, because he got his fame and he was already top of the line doctor, he could do some stuff that raised eyebrows. For example, he thought that it's okay for him to bring back a kind of a quack thing, a method called hypnosis. But how did that come about? In Salpêtrière, there were the hysterics. The hysterics nobody liked because they were seen as liars. People were thinking that they were making symptoms up, that they are attention seekers, they are some dangerous frauds, and they were put together with other socially unacceptable people that had other kind of problems. And the doctors didn't want to look at them. They felt that they did not belong in medicine. They were causing anger, contempt. They were some kind of subhumans. So they were put somewhere away, somewhere on the margins, on the edges, where you can actually live your life without really bothering with their existence. And they stayed in deplorable conditions. So for some reason, his curiosity, probably he got worried he's going to get bored after all this fame. But nevertheless, he went to see what's with these people because we don't know what's going on with them. We can't explain anything. To him, they were interesting. They had paralysis, seizures, fainting spells, sensory losses, pains. None of them could be explained through the usual categories. So he came across an unbelievable discovery for which he called his colleagues, his students, writers, and politicians to show them that, too early, to show them that there is something very interesting about these people, that under hypnosis, strange things happen, or with post-hypnotic suggestion. He can create symptoms. He can create the same symptoms that the hysterics had, and he can cure them with hypnosis. So what did that show? That showed that the mind had this power that I mentioned earlier, but at that time nobody knew about it, that it has the power to create so severe symptoms that they are as disabling as real structural defects that would be caused by tumors and strokes, right? Which was an amazing discovery. It shook the world because the mind until then, according to theologians and philosophers, did not particularly extend that far, did not extend into a part of the mind that only shows up like that in very weird ways, and it has this huge amount of power to cause problems. At the same time, in Vienna, Joseph Breuer was treating another hysteric, Anna O. Later on, her name became known, her real name, Berta Pappenheim. And he was talking, I mean, they were talking, and she was talking a lot, and she was talking quite freely. And because of the freedom to talk like that, when she talked about something very significant to her, very painful, apparently some of her symptoms were relieved, some of them disappeared completely, maybe only temporarily. Nevertheless, they were changed by free speech. Talk about the power of free speech. So Breuer also had another discovery. So Charcot discovered that people in an altered state of mind have access to a power unknown until that time. And Breuer discovered that if you let people talk freely, the mind gets power over the symptoms. Somehow they get relieved. Very important discoveries. Very important discoveries that led to something very new about the mind. Who knew about this before? So those kind of observations, because many times I think Freud is kind of easily dismissed as kind of old-time fraud, or like he got a lot of things wrong. But Freud met these people. He was very eager because he was a neurologist. He did some of his own work in neurology and he was good, but he was confronted with the same things. And he had similar qualities to Charcot, right? They were both curious about anomalies. They did not particularly like assigning things to a known category where it wasn't a good fit. They were very good observers, and both of them had unbelievable courage to endure ridicule. So they also both became famous by willing to stake their reputation for some
Daddy,
unpopular.
you want this soup?
Hello? Somebody has the microphone on and is getting a soup. So both of them became famous because they were willing to look at these things that nobody wanted to look at. And this is how he became to the first model of the mind. Again, not arbitrarily, if you look at it, is that the observations that were made forced them to find a way to describe what they've seen that was not described before. So I want to make a parallel here. If you look at the story that I told you, you have three categories of people. There are heroes, deplorables, and doctors, others, the public, right? So the heroes are somewhere in the middle, Charcot, Breuer, and Freud, right? The deplorables are the hysterics, the part that nobody wants to know about. And the doctors and other people were the popular opinion. And the model of the mind that Freud came up with, in a way, mimics the kind of population you have there. The topographic model would have the unconscious, which is, yeah, you don't want to know about some stuff because it's inconvenient. If you are to include them in your mind, you would really have to shift your structure around to make enough place for them. So we don't want to be bothered with this kind of stuff. The conscious is the popular opinion, is the very well organized, like very well-oiled, well-oiled functioning machine, right? As long as you ignore the contradictions. And then you have something in between, the people who belong to the conscious, but also are willing to look at what's the unconscious. So they are kind of in between. So Freud came up with this model of the mind that was an expansion of what existed before, that you have a conscious mind, You have a preconscious. This is easily you can make an effort and make it conscious, right? And you have an unconscious. But here the preconscious is kind of like the customs. One way to think about it that came to my mind is, if you've seen the Matrix, it's like the train station with its own rules, and it's only the trainman that can say there who passes and who stays. You have to know the rules, otherwise forget about it. So part of this is that it's not particularly easy to do, oh, let's just bring the unconscious into the conscious. No. You don't want to demolish the whole structure of the conscious. You have to be very careful. The conscious has to be ready for this kind of breakthrough. Otherwise, it can destroy the whole. And there are forces, right? It is clear that these things are not staying there because they want to stay there. The unconscious content really pushes for expression. It doesn't want to stay unconscious. And the conscious really doesn't want the unconscious. He wants the unconscious to be away. And the preconscious has to develop all kind of mechanisms to make things stay like that. So there are forces going around. In that case, you have to figure out, if you are to investigate further what's going on in the mind, then you have to figure out who's doing what to maintain this kind of state of affairs. So here is a combination of the structural model and the topographic model. The topographic model is the conscious, preconscious, and unconscious. And the structural model is about the ego, superego, and id. It's one way you can split the mind. It's a useful way to look at what part of the mind, what may be in conflict with another part of the mind. And there are tensions between them, and they need to figure out how to live together in some kind of harmony. So this is the job of the ego, right? The ego was decided, they called it the ego to deal with the pressures from the impulses, right? We want to get satisfaction, we want to get things, right? We want to have food and sex and things that keep us alive as an individual and a species. And also we want to go by some rules, probably for the same reasons, to not get killed in the process of getting the things we like. So then you have the rules from the superego, the prohibitions, and then you have the desires. So the desires and the prohibitions are processed by the ego, that also has a view of the outside reality with what it has good and what it has dangerous and what it has neutral. And it has to manage a way to find how we can get the most without getting killed. So I would think, and psychoanalysts and psychodynamic theory says that, you get harmonious compromises, then you get health. And if you get conflict inside your mind, then you have conflictual compromises that lead to particular symptoms, mental and even physical, as you can see in panic attacks. And right, it can move in the body. The psychological conflict being converted, right? That's where we got the conversion disorder. That's what gets converted, the psychic conflict. So I worked on this with ChatGPT and asked ChatGPT to help me figure out the definition according to the psychoanalytic psychodynamic school of thought about what is a mental symptom. And this is the definition. I'm not all happy about it, but this is the best for now. From a psychodynamics perspective, a mental symptom is a compromise formation in which psychic resources are diverted from adaptive engagement with reality into managing inner conflict, producing an expression that is meaningful yet costly. So you can look at it as that you get consumed with internal civil war rather than fighting some external enemies. And these are some of the things that get mobilized in order to keep things where they are. The more basic ones are the repression, displacement, reversal, and compensation. And then usually the things on the other column are probably combining one or more, a few more of the basic ones: denial, splitting, projection, reaction formation, identification with the aggressor, rationalization, intellectualization, sublimation, and humor. I can elaborate on that, and also I can maybe send, if people are interested, I can send a paper about how you recognize them. As you see patients, how do you recognize what they may be using? I found this parallel another important thing to talk about when we're trying to change people's minds, right? In the Declaration of Independence, you have this paragraph: prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. For me, this is a very important statement that shows that what happens actually at larger scale when you set up government across many people happens also in the mind of one person. We do have structures that get established one layer on top of another since early childhood, and those are essential. They are not particularly easily changed, particularly since at some point they may have been absolutely necessary to establish that way for psychological survival. And in therapy, when you try to get the mind to convince the mind to accept some unconscious content, this is what you're getting across. What, you want me to change the way I was all this time? Particularly since these structures are not just a problem, they are actually what got people to be successful. So, for example, rigidity. If you're able to be very rigid and disciplined, you're going to get to be very successful. And that if at some point your excessive discipline leads to some difficulty, some problems, you're going to have very hard time relaxing some of the discipline. That's why I put here that it's not just governments, it's also resistance to change at an individual level. So what do we do in therapy? In therapy, in contrast with other people, we're playing stupid. We do not presume we know anything. That's why, even there is the joke that, you meet a psychoanalyst, you say hello, he's going to answer, what do you mean? So yes, we're going to ask a lot of what do you mean, and try to figure out a lot of questions, and we listen. Evenly hovering attention means that we're listening to everything, to illogical switches from one topic to another. We're looking at the affect that accompanies the verbal production of the patient, like if there is a match or not between the emotional expression and the content of what the patient says, and absences. Like if a particular subject is absent from the patient discourse, it's very important. If you're talking to patients for weeks in a row and their mother never comes up, it's something about that relationship with the mother. It's some problem that maybe not ready to come and surface in the therapy setting. So we create this safe, predictable space for expression. Part of it is that you're not judging the person, you're not criticizing. Neutrality is often misunderstood. It's not like we don't have a system of values. We do care about things being right, but neutrality means that you're not taking one side of the conflict. The patient is going to have a conflict between different agencies of the mind. It's not a good idea to take a side with one agency versus another. Another psychoanalyst said that he starts every single session tries to at least, with no agenda or memory. So that means that you don't take over and have a goal for the patient. You're generally letting them have the goal. I think in my training they even said something like, if you're working harder than your patient, you're doing something wrong. It should be their agenda. And no memory, that's part of the memory. It's usually used for agenda. Many times psychoanalysis is described as digging. It's not digging. you shouldn't be digging. If you're doing digging, you're doing the wrong thing. That sounds like use of force. You're trying to force unconscious content. You're not ready for that. If it didn't surface, you're not ready. So it's not digging, it's more like creating an environment for that unconscious material to come to the surface, and it's not going to come unless the preconscious and the conscious mind is ready for it. We're not using suggestion. It's not a good idea to use suggestion. That's actually what Freud didn't like hypnosis, particularly for that reason, that he didn't want to use his authority or doctor's authority to move things in whatever direction that's having an agenda. In therapy, it's not like you're done with evaluation and then you continue with treatment. This is an ongoing process. Treatment starts at hello, and evaluation goes together with the treatment. It's all the time, from beginning to end. And the doctor is a guide to self-discovery, the mirror or reflection. And I mean, yeah, we're trying to make the unconscious conscious, and ultimately the main role is to try to harmonize whatever is not harmonious, to kind of remove conflict. By the way, I've heard one analyst says that I know when it's how he was asked, how do you know when it's the end of treatment? He said that there is a cessation of effort. And what I think he meant is that when you get better, you no longer have internal struggle. Your tension is with your environment, but internally things get harmonized. The superego and the id kind of manage to make peace, and the ego is happy to shake the deal, to shake on the deal. We can return to the symptoms. Now that we have some structures of the mind, some things to rely on, kind of a little bit of light in the unknown, because we did talk about a few things that we can find there. Maybe we can revisit and start again asking questions about the symptoms. I wouldn't necessarily go over all of them, but one thing that the psychodynamic school of thought says, that everything is a compromise formation. So that means everything is an attempt at a solution. It's at least an attempt. And the thing that makes it a symptom, when it goes beyond a certain threshold, probably subjective threshold, then when you call it maladaptive. So the depressed mood has a function, the sadness has a function. It's probably the best state of mind in which you can remove your emotional investment in something that's no longer there in the physical world, right? It's not enough that it's no longer there in the physical world. It's there in your mind. Like Coldplay was singing, I don't know about concerts with Coldplay, but Coldplay was singing in Viva la Vida. Those who are dead are not dead, they are living in our head. So we have to do something in our mind when somebody passes, or when we lose something in the external world. So yes, sadness has a function. It gets you in the right kind of mindset to deal with loss. Loss of interest, as long as it's specific, as if it's specific to a loss, it's probably adaptive. It's problematic when it extends all over the place, like the way Agent Smith replicated himself in the Matrix. It completely destroyed, it got all over the place. Appetite change. If somebody refuses food, you can have a dynamic interpretation what the mind is trying to do. Maybe the mind feels invaded by a lot of toxic materials, and then in the physical realm, the mind would say, no, I had enough, I need to digest all of this and maybe eliminate some of it before I can get some more. The problem, it's a problem of translation in the physical world, but the problem also becomes that the mind takes over, right? It's no longer that the appetite is dictated by feedback loops from the physical body. It becomes another agenda, which is obscure if it's coming from the unconscious, right? you can find about all these symptoms that they are not random, meaningless production of the mind. They do have meaning, and the more you find out about the meaning, the more you can demystify them, and they would lose some of their power, their grip they have on the patient. Jung came up with a very important distinction, especially when you have to deal with the symptom. Do we have symptoms or do they have us? So Jung was saying, everyone knows nowadays that people have complexes, but is not so well known, though far more important theoretically, is that complexes can have us. And I think somewhere in his writings, he's also talking that from some point of view, this medieval idea of being possessed is actually far closer to the truth than it's good for comfort. Yes, so when your appetite is changed based on the needs of the mind, that means something that you're not aware of in the mind takes over what your body needs. So it's not surprising that these people thought that there is something demonic taking over somebody, right? Because the unconscious is not perceived as self. It's perceived as some kind of enormous power somewhere from outside of what you call you, right? That's not part of me. It's part of something I don't know about. So it doesn't feel that I own it, even though it shows that it's mine. So I didn't talk about anxiety. Anxiety is a big thing, and my favorite psychoanalyst that I mentioned earlier considers it's a very different symptoms than all the other symptoms. And because this is the kind of the alarm bell. I think he was saying someplace that, well, if you wouldn't have anxiety, what would you have? For sure, you're not going to be bored, unless the boring feeling can get overwhelming. But if you remove anxiety, you're going to have some other overwhelming feeling that that's going to come over you. So yes, it's the alarm bell. And he has a paper called The Fear of Breakdown that I found it particularly useful for me. And I wanted to talk to you about this, about a good, what I consider to be a good depiction of the anxiety. In Kung Fu Panda, Master Oogway was the boss for the very smooth system they had of training, and the temple, the palace, the village next to it looked like a very harmonious place to be in. Except he had a vision. Something bad is going to happen, right? The fear of breakdown. Something bad is going to happen. Tai Lung is going to come back, and he's going to take the throne, and he's going to get the scroll, and he's going to get unlimited power. So it's going to be a mess. It's going to be the destruction of everything. Nothing's going to look the way it was. And because of this, they wanted to double the guards, right? Improve the defensive structure, work on the defenses. And as they were working on trying to get the defenses stronger, so Tai Lung cannot get out of his seclusion, he was well hidden somewhere deep, and where nobody could find him, through layers and layers of restraints, 1,000 soldiers, and he was in 4-point restraint with some straitjacket on him and some needles that looked like they are paralyzing needles. And that's what they were trying to strengthen the defenses. The messenger came and dropped a feather, and it was enough. A feather was enough. A very small thing was enough to get Tai Lung out of his restraints, get out, and really start a whole revolution there. Rebellion, right? I think this is a very good depiction of the unconscious with the unconscious content threatening to come out in the conscious harmony and mess the whole thing up because nobody knows what to do with it. This is the danger of what what can happen if you abreact far too soon, if you flood the conscious mind with unprocessable yet unconscious content. So Winnicott was saying that when people worry about something bad is going to happen in the future, they generally think it's something in the external environment. Not that the external environment is not dangerous, but a proper amount of fear towards what can happen in the outside environment. It's fear, it's objective. That's not a symptom. We're talking about symptoms. So it's when it comes to about an excessive fear that something bad is going to happen, then that fear is coming from someplace. So what he discovered through talking to his patients is that the fear is not about something externally collapsing, but something internally collapsing. So it's about the collapse of the mental structure. Okay, so it's not internal, it's not external, it's internal. The other thing is that it's not in the future, in a way, it's in the past. Tai Lung was the problem he was because of what happened in the past. And he was pushed there out of awareness, like completely neglected there, just building up rage. And that's what happens with the unconscious content. It always pushes to get back out. So the drama happened in the past. The danger in the future is only that the conscious mind is going to become aware of it. But it already happened. So he's talking about this, that anxiety represents really, in my mind, the way I describe it is it's a double displacement. It's not outside because it's inside, and it's not in the future, it's in the past. The only thing in the future is that you're going to become aware of how bad things were in the past. That to me was very helpful in trying to help people guide their way towards where the real danger is, and maybe how to prepare the conscious mind to incorporate something that was previously completely unacceptable, and how to maybe create a new structure that would rely less on repression and would use much more mature defense mechanisms. So I'm going to stop with a few things. Is that it's good to make a distinction to what extent you're addressing the mind, to what extent you're addressing the brain. And also when you hear people saying when they do mental health, what do they really do? Do they address the brain or the physical body or the mental? So that's also who do you want to, and who can you help with? Can you help with the thief or with the loneliness and darkness in Freud's metaphor? How do you look at symptoms? Do you look at them as being nonsense or just a language you didn't learn yet? Are they some enemies to fight, or are they distress to be understood? Distress calls. So yeah, this is all I had to say for now. And yeah, let's open, I guess, to questions. And I think some people want to talk about probably the whole thing about antidepressants and getting people off of them, right?
Well, hey, Christian, thank you so much for that presentation. And yeah, we can open it up for questions if you want to come off mic. Mute on your microphone and ask Christian a question directly.
Oh, I see that there was a chat.
Yeah,
Did I miss something important on the chat that I need to review?
No, I addressed all the chat issues, but Dr. David Vela has his hand up. So Dave, you
Okay.
want to come off mute and ask your question?
Hello, Christian. Thank you very much for that presentation. I find it very interesting because I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm internal medicine. But I want to go back to what you opened up with. You were talking about the blind spot. Now, for me, that kind of reminded me of delusional disorder. Because we know within the delusion, there is a massive blind spot and inability to assimilate new information regarding the delusion for which the mind has already made up its conclusions on. in regards to the delusional disorder, I was wondering if you're aware of it's some fairly recent neuroscience regarding the hemispheric model of consciousness. Are you familiar with that?
No. No.
Okay, so this is cutting edge neuroscience. Basically, it can be called the hemispheric model of consciousness, and it's from a psychiatrist out of Scotland. Okay. And he wrote a book. I think he published it in about 2012 or 13, or somewhere around in 2012, called The Master and His Emissary, where he laid out his model of consciousness based on his own research, neuroscience research after becoming a psychiatrist. He worked on both sides of the pond, Great Britain and in the United States. I'm not sure if it was Harvard, not sure which medical center. And then he updated, it got such good reviews and people asked for more. He wrote an updated a version of his work published in 2022 called The Matter with Things. So I just want to know if you were familiar with that. But you
the only thing that I'm marginally aware of is that there is a guy in South Africa, Mark Solms. He's a neuropsychoanalyst who's trying to find common ground between psychoanalytic concepts and neurophysiology. One thing with delusions are organizing things, and that's a part of one thing is that you don't necessarily want to remove somebody's delusion, because the other option, it's in a way the same thing like with obsession and compulsions, is that that's an attempt at organizing the world, and what's underneath is chaos. So before the idea is that the delusion, I would imagine, just in a way the similar thing would be about compulsion. The only way to remove it would be to create a better governance, right? If the delusion makes the world simpler, right? Less ambiguous. In a way, it's similar to calling something major depressive disorder. That's a delusion. We believe in it. There is no such thing as major depressive disorder. They made it up. That's a made-up diagnosis. It's a delusion. We love it because it helps us talk to each other and feel like we know what we're talking about. But it's a fake organization of data. It's based on the arbitrariness for convenience. So it's not that different in a way. So you see, the thing is that to a great extent, you could see psychodynamics behind it. And it comes out of lack of safety. It's in a way, it's a retreat in fantasy. You can't deal with the universe that's far too complex. So you're going to simplify it. And you're going to simplify it in a way that works for you. We're all delusional in some way. The thing that makes delusional people stand out is that they believe other stupid stuff than we do. So of course they stand out. But if you take a mass delusion, then you look like I'm fine, because everybody's. Paulo Coelho describes a situation. He has a story about a king who has his kingdom is completely crazy because all the people in that kingdom drink from the same fountain. And he's trying to convince, he's talking to all of them, please stop drinking, it makes you crazy. And it's people that like, I don't know what you're talking about. Who's crazy? Nobody's crazy. Everybody's like me. So he didn't manage to convince anyone to stop drinking from that. And he was so pained by his solitude that he started drinking himself from the fountain because he preferred to get crazy than live with that level of solitude. Pretty painful story, but particularly when we're looking at what happened in the past few years and the push towards conformity, it's absolutely amazing. So I'm all for people who have the energy and interest to look into the neurological basis of stuff. For me, I'm kind of going the other way, like, fine, go do that work. I want to stay with the mind. I want to look at the other part that people don't want to look, the part that Freud was looking at, and this kind of all that's coming about from unconscious motivation, right? Things that we don't like to know, right? You don't want to find out that you had incestuous thoughts or who knows what you had in your past, right? That's more of where I feel like my inclinations go.
So with delusional order, does psychoanalytics and cognitive behavioral therapy help with that disorder? How helpful are those with that disorder if it is so fixed and it's dangerous to remove it unless you do it very carefully?
Well, it depends who you're talking to. The strict Freudians, so the very orthodox Freudians, they didn't want to deal with a lot of stuff. They kind of, worried well, like the typical neurotic. But then future developments in psychoanalysis, they did help with more and more disturbed patients. To what degree of success is questionable. And sometimes they probably go overboard in trying to help with something that probably it's impossible. So yeah, I don't have any more specificity than that, but I know that with the British school and with newer developments, people try to address situations with more and more disturbed people. In a way, I'm saying that even when I do involuntary admissions, I still do something that's psychodynamic, because it is psychodynamic to know when somebody doesn't have a piece of an ego and you have to take over, right? I need to restrain you. I know you don't have that piece of ego. If you can't gain that control, I have to take over. I have to restrain and I have to do something until we build up an ego so you regain control over yourself. That is psychodynamic to me. So it depends. It depends who you're dealing with and what talents they have. Some people presented, I guess, I don't remember, this was years ago when I did come across papers like that treating psychotic patients.
Thank you. I'll let
Thank you,
someone else ask.
Thank you, Kristen, very much. We are out of time, and I just want to put a plug in for Dr. David Vella, who's with us tonight. He will be covering our next topic next month. So second Wednesday of the month, Dr. David Vella will be talking about vaccinism. It's a very interesting topic. I've heard him speak on this before. It's not to be missed. And with that, we'll say goodnight to everyone. Kristen, again, thank you so much for your presentation tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I hope it was helpful.
Very good. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.